Thank you. As Celia was saying, I hope you are all nice and comfortable because we're about to make you a little uncomfortable. So apologies for that, but we'll take you on a journey and give some insights towards the end of the presentation of some of the solutions that you could actually start to look at within your own organization from safeguarding of your assets and what's actually happening from a cyber risk perspective, and how that actually ties in ultimately with the conversation that's been held through the course of the morning. All right, so if you can give me some assistance. So we're going to go through a couple of aspects and have a look at the risk landscape. I don't know how many IT professionals or cybersecurity specialists that we actually have in the audience today. Do we have any of those? A few? Okay, great. All right, so you guys will understand this 100%. For the rest of you, all I want to do is just a toe in the water, because this is a massive, massive problem, and if it's not a number one board agenda or senior management, executive, shareholder concern right now, you kind of missing the boat, because it is a huge problem. And last Friday, 19th of July, was a case in point with the CrowdStrike. So we're going to go over just 3 examples, some case scenario around that, break that down and just unpack how some of those aspects actually occurred around those cyber aspects. Look at how we can actually find solutions. We are in the age of the 4th Industrial Revolution. We are in a technology age. The conversation that has happened here behind me, and sorry for my back for everyone on the stage, but this conversation is a digital conversation. They talked about currency and the evolution of currency, which is what Pierre started with, but we are talking about technology. This is a world of digital assets. It's a world of data that we live in today. It's what our children are being born into, and I don't know how they do it, but to put a cell phone in their hand and they automatically know how to use that thing. I help my dad, and he's going, what do I click here, and what do I do there, and how? That's the challenge that we are dealing with. So we have to understand what this landscape is actually all about, and we have to fight fire with fire. So the solutions that we have to come up with from this side of the dark web, the deep web, we in business, as individuals from an advisory point of view, dealing with these challenges, we actually have to be as effective and smarter and more efficient than this network of criminal infrastructure and the industry that exists behind this cybercrime and the deep web and the dark web. Okay, so having a look at the landscape, what are the drivers? If we just look at a couple of drivers that has really seen the evolution and the capability, providing the opportunity for the exponential increase in growth in cyber risk that we have seen really over the last sort of, I suppose, 7-8 years. But we go back to 2015, that it really became a front and profile, high-level issue that people started taking cognizance of and started understanding. Yes, cyber risk has been around since there has been the internet and the ability to be able to digitally manipulate and extort information and cause that kind of a challenge. But we've seen an exponential increase about over the last 7-8 years. So the increase in of connectivity online has been a massive, massive driver. Obviously, the more online we are, the more we evolved into the cloud, the more we've adopted the digital universe that we live in. I don't know if anybody here doesn't have a cell phone, doesn't have some sort of digital or technology device, but I would suspect the answer to that is no. So we can't really function. There isn't a much dial-up telephone to speak, and if you talk to somebody about a fax machine, well, we don't know what that is, and if you can even get one. So the age of digital transformation has really driven a lot of opportunity from a cyber risk perspective. So I just want to look at two quick little graphs. So if you just click on for us, this is a graph that has a look at what happened, and it dates back, as you can see there, 1997. So when the internet really became mainstream, back in the mid-70s, all the way through, you can see that there was quite a number of years right up until 1995. That's about the time that cell phones really hit in a significant way in South Africa, if anybody here is old enough to fully remember that. So we started to get much more digitally enabled, 1995, and then as you can see there, 2010, approximately a little bit earlier than that, was Amazon, the World Wide Web. Microsoft Azure really hit quite significantly in 2010, and then you could see an exponential growth from a cloud adoption. What we started doing, not just on our personal PC, in the office or in the home, we were now really a connected society, and we were very much a society for the most part that was online. So let's look at the next graph, which actually looks at a similar adoption, but a whole different curve from an AI perspective. So back to 2000, which is really the point in AI has been around actually a lot longer than we think. There's been work on AI dating right back to the 60s, into the 70s, 80s. A lot of work that's been done on AI, but mega corporations, large organizations, government, military, those were the types of organizations. Very big budgets, a lot of black budgets that went into early development of AI models and the use of AI models as we understand it and we know today. Not a lot of public use. Not a lot of the average mid-size or large corporation that had the money to be able to invest and actually start putting AI into the business. But we could see that sort of business adoption started happening between 2010 up until really 2020. Then we hit 2022. Okay, and we started to see, now it's an 18-month period. You can see that graph is straight up and vertical. What happened? ChatGPT. What did ChatGPT? ChatGPT did for the world of technology explosion that the internet did over 40 odd years. ChatGPT did in an 18-month period. The entire world went AI as a business as usual. Anybody who doesn't use some sort of tool like a ChatGPT, we've even got AI, which is really edge from an Azure point of view, that you don't use an AI tool in your day-to-day activities right now. Anybody? Okay, so it's very much a aspect of a life as usual, never mind a business as usual. Okay, so with that background, let's go on to the next and just have a couple of a look at the rest of these. So with this explosion of this very sophisticated technology, we have a very sophisticated, capable, organized network of criminality on the dark web, on the deep web, that is really effectively using some very clever tools. All the way through to you can get a ransomware as a service on the dark web, and a whole slew of subject matter experts and advisors, Bitcoin specialists, financial advisors. You can pick this up on the dark web, and you can have a complete network of expert advisory to plan your next ransomware attack and exactly how you're going to perpetrate that. That's the level of sophistication that we are in fact dealing with. And you can be sure that those experts are using exceptionally effectively bots, and all sorts of augmented AI in order to be able to perpetrate the types of ransomware, the cyber attacks, and the data breaches that we've seen over recent years. Right now, the botnets that are sitting on the internet that are actively in use, so a botnet that you might discuss boats with your friend, and 3 minutes later you're all of a sudden getting some suggestive ads in Facebook or some recommendations in whatever Instagram that here's a nice boat that you should look, or there's a boat place down the road that you could possibly get that kind of boat from. So that's the kind of intuitiveness that's happening in the marketing space and research and analysis that a lot of companies are using, and using very effectively. They're using it for a fit for purpose from a business perspective. But equally, there are criminal bots that are doing very, very much exactly the same thing. They're sitting there, they've been in your networks, they've been listening, they found that little loophole through a patch you didn't do, from an IT perspective on a Windows system that's outdated. I've got my opportunity, I've got my little botnet army sitting in your organization, and I'm sniffing out every single vulnerability and every single weakness that is sitting in your network, and I'm sitting there for 6 months, and I'm quite happy about that. There is over 51% of the botnets on the internet today are up to no good. They are there from a nefarious criminal perspective. So that's the sort of challenge that we're actually dealing with when it comes to the scope of the cyber risk landscape. All right, so if we just look at a couple of these stats. So the total cyber crime, so this is looking at the revenue projection on the criminal side of the fence. So what does this business look like? Well, the projections from a creating revenue opportunity from a dark web market perspective is set and predicted to be about $9.5 trillion. There's not, unless you're Elon Musk, there's not many organizations that are hitting those figures on the bottom line. So this is a massive, massive industry. There is a lot of reason to become very expert and very sophisticated in this industry. And goodness gracious, as we go through just three of these scenarios that we're going to unpack quickly and discuss, there is a volume of opportunity that we provide some of the most sophisticated, some of the most skilled individuals out there in the worldwide marketplace that exists today. And I promise you, if we just listen to the Bitcoin conversation, the cryptocurrencies, they're definitely not transacting in pigs. Okay. So an average cost of a data breach runs at about $4.5 million US. That's a mid-sized large company. From a South African perspective, average cost, mid-sized company, about 40 individuals, turning over around 140 to 300 million a year. You're looking at about 5 million in a most likely average data breach cost. Even for an organization of that size, 5 million out of the pocket, off the bottom line, that's quite a hard pill to swallow. And the smaller companies are not exempt. It's the cost of the fines, the cost of the loss, and approximately, according to the statistics, we're still sitting in a position, both locally in South Africa, unfortunately, as well as internationally, that about 80% of companies pay the ransomware. There are those stalwarts, they've got their stuff together, they've got a maturity in their cyber risk capability, they've put controls in place around both the people, the process, the systems, the technology. They've done the right things, in other words, to really evolve maturity. Those are the guys that can weather it out. They can bring the data back up from a backup. They have a backup of a backup, so they have multiple redundancies and resilience within their strategy, and they're able to deal with it. But they still go through an extortion process. So you don't pay the ransomware, you're having an extortion conversation, and how that PII is actually going to be released and what markets it's going to be released. I mean, there are tools that we work with that you literally, you can, without any engagement from the IT of the company, I can put a website URL of an organization. So I can put in guideline.co.za, and I can get a complete record of what information has been extorted, what information is actually sitting bundled and is being readied to be put on a dark web or a deep web market, information from a PII bundle or package per record, how much it's being sold for. And if we look at some of these stats, so approximately in that MOAB, so it's one of the ones we're going to unpack just now, there were 26 billion records that were breached in that mother of all breaches on in January this year. Now, on the dark web, you can see the information that is actually being sold from the personal information, confidential, bank accounts, credit cards, and so forth at $10 a record, $20 a record, $15 a record. Now, $15 times 26 billion, now you start to see how the numbers add up very, very quickly, and how much opportunity exists on the criminal side of the fence. So it is absolutely critical that there is more attention to the detail of what it is that we are doing in an organization, and that we're getting smarter and more effective within the organization to be able to deal with the level of sophistication that does in fact actually exist. So we've picked for this morning just 3 examples, and I'll go over why I picked these particular examples, because they're actually fascinating case studies as to exactly the how of the way in which these breaches and these failures effectively happened within each of the organizations. So Equifax was one of the first data breaches that occurred. It was right around the GDPR, and when GDPR hit the scene, a lot of conversation, big fines and penalties that would be spoken about under the GDPR, and Equifax was just one of the bigger breaches that occurred around that time. So 209,000 consumers were affected. I don't have the exact set of the number of records, but it was a pretty significant volume of records that was actually breached at the time. And what's very interesting is that it was a known vulnerability that was exploited. So it was some patches that was recommended for a particular version of Windows on a Windows server, just standard routine IT in Windows patches that should have been affected. Now, Equifax and the IT department, they had technology in place. They had good tools. There was nothing wrong on the surface value of their IT strategy that had been put in place. They had good frameworks that they had been adopting, but they ignored the alarms that came out of their own system. They ignored the notifications and the recommendations of the patches on the Windows server that should have occurred. So they violated at the human level the process and procedures that they should have taken at the time that they had the notifications. They suffered the breach. So, completely preventable. It was not something that came out of the blue. It was something that they could have easily addressed had they taken the correct actions and escalated when they had identified that people were not doing what they should be doing. So this was not a technology problem, perhaps a process problem, certainly a people problem, and an improvement of assistance strategy was definitely required in this particular scenario. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. As we move into the next section of the conversation with Shani. So the next breach happened in January. It was called, or given a tag as a Moab, mother of all data breaches, and it was massive. Anybody hear about this breach? You guys familiar with the Moab breach that happened in January? Yes, IT guys, okay. So this affected 26 billion records. That's a pretty large volume of data, massive volumes of data. It happened in multiple countries, multiple sectors, multiple organizations, both online platforms and businesses where the data was breached. So LinkedIn was affected, Canvas was affected, Dropbox was affected. It was huge, okay? A lot of these breaches are kind of kept a bit under wraps because nobody wants to talk about the fact that there's a huge amount of data that has been breached over the last 5 odd years, and where that data is actually unfortunately sitting. It's sitting in the deep web, on the dark web. The way in which this breach actually happened, I found significantly fascinating, because the access to this information was actually perpetrated through an organization that had set up a forum, which effectively was a website, where this website was giving public awareness information of all the breaches that had been happening up until January. And in this website, they had all the connections to the various organizations across the world that had suffered breaches. This website was extremely lacking on its security. The threat actors used that website that was informing everybody of the various breaches to perpetrate the Moab breach. And that's how they did it. So the conversations that I've had with so many organizations, that when we do an analysis and we look at the vulnerabilities from a front-end exposure, just starting with your URL of your website, and the IT said, well, there's hardly anything on the website. There are so many connections because, if we go back to the earlier slides, we live in a digital, interconnected, online world. So it just takes one patch or one port that's left open, or misconfiguration of an email server. And I had my opportunity, because I'm slick, I'm quick, I know how to get my little bots into your network and perpetrate the disaster that you do not want. If you are a CSOS or a CTO, you do not want to be having that conversation with your executive of your board, that your data is breached and now you are needing to deal with the aftermath. Okay, so the last scenario that I want to talk about is very, very relevant. Who was affected by the Microsoft server Azure outage that happened last Friday? Okay, a few of us, all right. So this outage was, quite frankly, from an IT compliance point of view, nothing short of breathtaking. This outage happened. How many in the room have an understanding as to what actually happened with the Microsoft? Okay, all right, good. All right, so how this effectively happened was through a software update. So behind the Microsoft Azure environment, there is a cybersecurity organization called CloudStrike. Anybody got CloudStrike within their infrastructure? Yeah? Okay. So CloudStrike conducted a standard routine software update on one of their mainstream applications. And in that update, there was a code error that effectively blue-screened Microsoft systems, Azure environments being one of them. And how that happens and how the CTO of CloudStrike can stand up and say, well, we really now need to look at our dev UAT, so user acceptance testing deployment strategies, and make some improvements, I don't know, because they are one of the market leading cyber security and cyber threat defense technologies on the planet. And how they can have such a fundamental error that goes through code that can bring half of the known Western world to its knees. We were talking hospitals, airlines, trains, government departments. There were surgeries that had to be stopped midway the surgery. You definitely don't want to be that person lying on that table at that moment in time. There were people in intensive care that had life support systems that were inoperable before certain backup strategies could actually be deployed. So it was a pretty scary event from a worldwide perspective as how impactful one single activity in one organization through a third-party service provider just making an update to a standard piece of software that should be routine but exceptionally rigorous, that impacted these two major organizations plus the rest of the hands that went up early in the auditorium. We have to ask ourselves, how can these kind of issues happen in an age where we are so technology driven? So there's something that we are not quite getting correct in our defense strategy from a cyber risk management point of view, in the interconnectivity of our people, our process, our systems, and our technology, and bringing these things together so that we don't have the silo of the Equifax scenario where my IT guy can ignore an alarm, ignore the best practice recommendations, and have one of the most significant data breaches occur in all-time history. The website that we happily sharing all sorts of information that is sensitive around data breaches, that we don't check that website that I'm sharing that information to has the right and appropriate levels of security from an effective practice is concerned, that I don't have some sort of capability to govern a defense strategy against a critical, highly recommended service provider, I'm sure, but that literally brought my company to its knees for a period of time. Thank heavens it was as quickly resolved as it was between Microsoft and CrowdStrike and the individuals in between. It could have been a lot worse. So, how is it that we might evolve? As Pierre talked about the evolution of currency and how we are really looking at a future from an exchange point of view, from a currency perspective, into this world of digital currencies and the use of Bitcoin and what that vision might look like as we move forward. There are certainly a lot more experts than I that can discuss that scenario with you, but the fact of the matter is we are going digital in currency no matter what. It is as assured, in my point of view, as we are that AI is going to be here to stay with us. So we need to start being adaptive. We need to start understanding how we can be as effective and as efficient as the threat that we have that is out there from a criminal market point of view. So what I'd like to do with my colleague Charlie is discuss a couple of scenarios with you as to how we are actually taking some of these techniques from an AI perspective, and there are a lot of tools. There is a lot of models that can be used. There are a lot of aspects of AI that can be used very, very effectively in your organization. But on the same flip side, there also has to be a governance framework for ethical use of AI. How you are deploying and making use of AI, because AI is everywhere. We've got AI note takers as we sign into teams of multitudes of different versions and service packages. They can plug into Teams, take all your minutes, and do the whole job for you. We spoke about ChatGPT. There are sentiment analysis, the AIs that have been in marketing and research packages and solutions for years and years and years. This is all connecting a body of information. Everything in your organization is digital. If anybody's got a piece of paper that they're writing on today, somewhere along the line in your supply chain, in your process chain, somebody is turning even that piece of paper that you wrote down, they're putting it into a system somewhere. So that digital universe, we're not lacking data. We've got data coming out of our ears. What we're lacking is a skill set and the capability to actually interpret and data evaluate that information correctly. And that's what I'd like to go through just for a few minutes. So just to look at some of the areas that AI and control automation can be effective. I'm not going to go through the detail of it, but real-time monitoring. We can use AI so that in that Fairfax scenario, we get an alarm. We've got an identification in our compliance framework that says these patches need to be updated on these critical servers and these critical environments all the time. We can use NLP, so natural language processing, simple text outputs that I can escalate to a senior executive and put an IT concern in natural language speak before a critical decision maker, so that it's not left to the techie who went, we'll update these patches next month or next week because I got this as my task load right now, and we just can't afford the interruptions for the moment. Okay, so it changes the dynamic of how we can actually speak to executive management in a fashion that can be easily interpreted and understood using AI and a specific type of AI. Data analysis, automated auditing, natural language processing we spoke about. If we just go to the next one, fraud management, that's been used for quite a long time now, but we can actually get much more effective with AI models, training expert decision models that I can actually interpret and understand decisions. There was a conversation that I was having just in the break now with somebody where we can make or deploy AI models. AI models generally need a large, big volume of data to self-learn, and that's what most AIs are doing out in the World Wide Web. It's how ChatGPT works, and it's how it learns. But there are AIs that are available that I can take a subject matter expertise, I can take all the knowledge out of PR's head, or I can take all the knowledge out of Reg, and actually model the data, the understandings, the interpretations that they would make on a given scenario if they looked at a report or they looked at a body of data or a dashboard or got a notification of some sort of information in an alert that came their way. I can model them into technology so that the decision that they would have made with that data input, the AI makes with that volume of data, because they can't sit there looking at billions of transactions every second, but the AI can. And that's the value add. So at this point in time, I'm going to ask Charlotte to just run through this particular, or a couple of examples that we're assisting clients with, just to give you an idea of some of the things that can be done at a transactional governance, risk and compliance level, where we can actually use this nature of AI to go and find the risks at the data that's traversing through your organization, that's not necessarily sitting just in your finance system or just in your CRM system. It might be sitting in an email. It might even be sitting in a WhatsApp message group that you're sending information backwards and forwards. Sorry.
This is Daisy. So we sort of about making money, investing money. We need to make money in order to invest money. So one of the main drivers is the fact that, as Nikki indicated, those breaches that took place were due to very small standard day-to-day type of activities. Now, if we were able to actually continuously monitor those activities, we do so much work and investment into ensuring our employees are actually doing what they should, ideally documenting that out so that there's rules and governance and control in place. We even automate so that we can take away some of that human interaction, because people at the heart of things are a risk. We always in a business have to ensure that we're controlling and managing that. We have process monitoring in place, but it's still manual. It's still dependent on people, which means it's still potentially flawed. So what we really tried to dive into and having a look at is how can we automate process monitoring. So an ability to leverage AI, its capability to look at volumes and volumes and volumes of records to perform or actually outperform what any human being potentially could, and bring efficiency into our business so that we ideally are not being exposed due to mishaps and very easily controllable and manageable items, and we can keep making that money and investing it where we would like. So in this algorithm analysis, I'm just going to pop over to my next slide. We've actually really taken a look at how can you dive into the controlling aspects. Risk is a marvelous subject. We put these controls in place. We depend on people to actually take a look at whether or not they're proving to be effective. And that's where some of our flaw really starts to come in. So if we can automate that continuous checking, it falls into the realms of internal audit, control review, business process monitoring on an automated level. We are always double checking what we're doing and how we're doing it. So as Nikki indicated, with the AI capabilities, as long as content is digitized, and we have so much nowadays that really truly is digitized, we can pick it up, you can put algorithms into it, and you can feed it back on a continuous loop of checking. So we can pick things up before they take place. You can estimate the notifications when you need to. You can just help people do the things that they should be doing within your organization on a much more consistent and continuous basis.
So just to cut in there from what Charlie is saying, it's been imagined for a moment. We all write company policies. We all have IT policies that we configure and plot into the various vulnerability and threat management tools that we have. We have monitoring that's on the network and so forth. However, the big challenge is not the fact that we had technology in place, not the fact that we did, for the most part, write an efficient policy. It's actually the enforcement of that policy. So in those scenarios that we looked at, that IT techie that did actually, he had technology in place to tell them what was going on. He had a system to follow. He didn't follow it. So how do we mitigate against that in order to prevent and be more secure in being able to govern the threat landscape and prevent the dead breach or whatever it is, the risk of whatever is going to happen, the financial loss and so on and so forth. Because once these losses happen, one of the big impacts, of course, is the reputational management. So if I were to be able to take your policy, model and visualize that policy in a correct workflow process of what that process needs to execute on and produce, I was able to make improvements in that process in the visualization, and then I was able to actually deploy a set of algorithms into your organization that I had an AI that was fully educated in exactly what was ideal in the context of your business to prevent that risk from happening as that salesperson types in that piece of data to that system or sends that email or produces this invoice or affects those item controls. We're starting to get to where we need to be to have a similar level of sophistication as is being used against our organizations from a criminal network point of view. That makes sense, you guys?
Just what the criminals are doing, they're using AI to make themselves better. That's the aim. We're never going to eradicate people, we need people. But the more we can not depend on people to perform their duties at 100% on an ongoing basis, because we're human beings, we're not designed that way, that we can rely on utilizing AI tools to help maintain that on a much, much higher consistency, the better we manage risk overall. The more efficient we can make our business, the less exposure we have, the more money we can make. And that, in essence, is one of the major gains in being able to take AI and use it to boost the business, not just in making us work quicker, making sure we are working to the best of our ability as continuously as possible. Okay, then naturally, we still have people, and we have to make sure that we can manage our people because they can be some of our biggest exposure breaches. In most of those examples that Nikki discussed, it was the people that it came down to that did not perform their activities in the way that they probably should have, didn't pick things up, didn't do what they were needing to do. So again, I think there's a new era in the fourth industrial revolution, in where finance is going, in technology and digitization. Risk has to evolve. Heat maps, risk registers, they serve their purpose for eons, and they still have a purpose. But if we cannot evolve the way we look at risk, the way we are trying to help manage and mitigate risk, it's going to become the dial-up phone of the fourth industrial revolution. And we're just going to expose our businesses more and more. So in this factor, from a people risk perspective, we've really started to dive deep into, number one, get all your employees involved. Everybody nowadays has to be able to put in informative insights, be aware, and give us information, because that information is exposure of risk. It's giving us identification. It's ensuring that our employees are keeping track. And when we can layer AI on top of that, we can analyze volumes of data that a person can't. We can sentiment analysis to pick up where people might be hiding things and responses in their natural language text boxes. We ask them for commentary. We can pick up if they're being evasive, they're not really speaking truthfully. And if we start tying that in, even down to risk performance evaluations, we piece all this information together, and we've got an absolute bloom of new insight that we can actually know to handle risk on. So in this example, we were looking at an organization that we're actually working with. We dished out what we're calling an attestation letter. It's a simple little 6-question survey where we're going, guys, tell us what's going on in your world. Speak to us as an organization so that we can help you, you can help us, and our business overall is doing better. What do you see as concerns emerging within your area? Has there been any significant business change? Do we have any material events that we want to consider, we need to know about? And we're ranging from right down the bottom, ops, general ops guys, middle management, and all the way up to be able to get a big, interesting landscape view. Out of this, we then further actually had a number of individuals that raised concerns but gave no commentary on it. And diving into it a bit further and laying some of the sentiment analysis on top of it, we were able to deduce a summary output in the fact that we possibly had an employee who really pays next to nothing, had almost no insight or intel, but they're performing really badly. They are not actually executing their processes efficiently, to track up quickly, they're getting through activities. They're an employee that potentially is not worth their pay within your organization, and they themselves could be a risk, because if they're not invested into the betterment of your organization, they could be doing something that they shouldn't, that could expose you down the line. We also identified an individual that was performing fairly accurately. They raised concerns. They're working fairly moderately but not excelling. Maybe they're not a great fit for their position. Maybe they're underskilled. Again, risk in that space of a person. If they cannot perform optimally within their position, it's just a matter of time until they're making mistakes. And then a third, where they also raise concerns, no commentary, they're high performing, they get through their work really, really well. Why do they not want to voice those concerns? Perhaps it's an environment that they're too scared that they're going to get in trouble. We don't hear about these issues and concerns from our employees. We can't handle them until they've become a problem that is big enough to escalate up.
So just in the sense of time, because I think Pierce and Yang take, we ran over a little bit. The bottom line here is a big challenge from a cyber risk perspective. I don't believe that I need to tell anybody that. But at the same time, the tools are in the palm of our hands to actually defeat and deal very effectively with the challenge that is sitting in each and every organization today. It's just how are those tools? And we're at a time where the cost of AI is not just for the mega military organizations of the world, or the very, very large multinational corporates. There are AIs and tools, as some of which we've gone very, very briefly over today, that because we have a capability to integrate data, and not even in a traditional sense that we're pulling data together in one warehouse or one repository, but the capability to go get data in siloed environments that doesn't even have to sit in a system. It can be, as I said, a WhatsApp message or an Excel spreadsheet. We can go get that data as technologists. Then the trick becomes, how do I interpret effectively from a risk analysis perspective to give informed insight? And that's really where the expertise of your AI solution, because there's lots and lots of tools. It's how do we pull that information together, and how do we effectively interpret in these simple language statements that ultimately is going to be the defense strategy of the years going forward, that you want to start orientating your governance, risk and compliance frameworks and approaches to. I hope that's given you some food for thought, and it's something to think on going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.